Well, good afternoon. I see that it's 1:30, so time for us to get started. Welcome to Drupal Camp. I'm Bradley Roberts, and this is the session entitled Weather Everywhere. I've been working with Drupal since way back Drupal 6. You can email me here at be55roberts@gmail or my Twitter account. I think it's appropriate. This particular session is appropriate for those who are just beginning with Drupal 8. We're going to walk through the basic steps involved in creating your first custom module. This will include a review of existing modules out there, designing a custom filter for this particular implementation, and then going out and implementing it. We will take a demo tour through the site that I've built, which is going to be a live site. We'll try to add an entry into it, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. First, I created a website using Drupal 8, and this is what it looks like. I named it Awesome Hiking Experience. Quite frankly, I like to hike. I live up in Knoxville, about 45 minutes from the national park. There are hiking trails all over the place. There are also a bunch of them here in North Georgia. I just wanted to find some way to share my experience with others, and that sort of started this idea, and it sort of took off from there. Because I realized there's a challenge when you set up a website. How do you encourage readers to go hike? And I got to thinking about that and I realized, well, there's some things that are kind of impediments that you think about, one of which is the weather. You don't know exactly what the weather is going to be like on the trail. So if you're a little unsure, or you maybe think it's going to be a nasty day, then you might be reluctant to go. So I wanted to come up with a way on this site to provide a quick weather forecast. Something short, something sweet, but also trail specific. I thought if I could do that, then I could encourage people to get out and hike these trails and enjoy them as much as I have. First question you ask has got to be, if you've done the basic install of Drupal, do you use an existing module or do you create a custom one? Looking at the Drupal project site, we're all blessed because there's so many modules out there that others have done, have created, have sort of paved the trail, if you will, and you can leverage that. So of course I took a look and went out there and looked around to see what was going on. Excuse me. I did find a weather module, but it only applied to version 7.x. I also found a weather block, which looked kind of interesting, but it was kind of city specific, and I didn't think that would quite work for my particular application. Wonderground, which is a great resource, I'm going to recommend it to you, has a module out there as well, but again, it's kind of catered around the notion of you're in a city and you want to know one weather forecast for your local city. I needed to do something that was going to be diverse geographically, and I wouldn't have any zip codes, rather I'd have latitudes and longitudes to go by. And because I wanted to support multiple places, that kind of invited me to create my own. So I wound up deciding to create my own module called Hiking Weather. Now, the basic strategy that I decided to land on was to add a filter to the content. This would be a tag that I would add to each article that would identify both where I wanted to put the weather forecast and also the latitude and longitude for that particular trail. Simple. So all you had to do is left square bracket, weather, colon, latitude expressed as a decimal number, comma, longitude, and right square bracket. Doing this made it simple to then process each article as it was getting rendered, and using some search logic to go find this tag, parse out the information, go off and call some sort of weather database, in this case Wonderground, and then render the content. I now had a basic strategy for how I would pursue this in Drupal. So, where do you start? Well, since I go back to the Drupal 6 and Drupal 7 days, I got to wondering what's changed in Drupal 8, and I got to looking and realized that they changed a good bit. I found this wonderful quote by a guy named Blair Wadman that talks about the differences as a way of getting into it. Drupal 8 is object-oriented, and Drupal 7 is primarily procedural. This means that a lot of your code will now be in classes rather than simple functions. This is going to be overwhelming for many, but will certainly make module development more flexible, and you will upgrade your skills to modern programming practices in the process. So taking the new Drupal 8 approach was going to be my goal and objective here, and write everything in OOP so it would be effective. Well, when you get right down to it and you're ready to start, the first thing you need to do is create a directory structure. The starting directory would be under modules /custom, and then you name it whatever you want. In my case, hiking weather. Then under that hiking weather directory, I decided to create these additional directories. Images, which I was going to use to hold the weather icons that I'm going to be displaying. Source, under source, both a controller and a plugin directory. The controller would manage the overall module, and the plugin would be corollary to that. Well, let's get down to some code. I know you guys are developers. You want to see code, right? Okay. Well, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. The first thing you got to write is a YAML file. Anybody ever heard of YAML files before? Okay, cool. YAML is used in Drupal 8, and think of it as a superset of JSON. It's an easily readable text format with a minimum amount of formatting. So as a consequence, it's pretty straightforward and pretty readable. In this case, just the name of the module, a brief description, the fact that it's a custom package, a custom module, and importantly, that it applies to Drupal 8.x. That's all it takes, and Drupal then knows about your module. The next thing you need is a controller module. Got to have some code to go with it. So I created the hiking weather controller.php module. Drupal 8 kind of expects you to use a namespace. So I called my naming space Drupal hiking weather controller, and made use of the existing Drupal controller base so I could leverage in all the methods and properties of the basic controller. Inside of my controller, I defined these properties. Weather tag, which was going to be how the software was going to recognize the tag, in this case just the word weather, but it could have been today's weather or daily forecast or anything else you want it to say. Also, I define a regular expression that I will use to identify exactly where in a particular article content the weather tag is to be found. By the way, a good tip, if you haven't fooled with regular expressions much, there's a website out there called regex101.com that'll help you figure out how to write these things. It will tell you both what the expression that you gave it is doing and allow you to throw some sample data at it to make sure it's going to work properly. Sometimes you can get surprised with regular expressions. This one looks pretty complicated, but all it does is identify the three component parts: the weather tag, the latitude, and the longitude. Then I define these methods for the controller. The content method, enough said about that. The node view alter method, which is what goes out there and alters the view that is getting presented. And then two really functional methods: parse weather tag, which takes care of matching up the regular expression and pulling out the content, and then get forecast, which takes care of the back-end API call to go get the weather for that particular location. Well, I needed some way to test this, so the next thing you do is create a routing file in Drupal. And this is another YAML file. It's fairly simple and straightforward. it tells Drupal in this case how to handle the path/hiking weather, which I set up intentionally so I'd have a way to test out the module and make sure that it was functioning as intended. In this case, the defaults tell Drupal to use the controller, hiking weather controller, and to fire off the content method within that controller. It gives it a title of hiking weather, and it sets the permissions. In this case, full access to whoever is using the website. Now, once I had this in place, then I had pretty much the basics, but I also needed some way to allow a menu to fire. So you created another YAML file called the hiking weather links menu YAML. This defines the menu item that I just described and tells Drupal how to find it. The titles, hiking weather mobile module settings. The description is settings for the module. The parent tells it how to chase down the tree and find this. It's going to go through the admin pages and go to the config development screens there. And then the route name defines inside the software how it gets to the content method by invoking the hiking method, the hiking weather class and the content method. Then I wanted to have some way to style my module and the way it was getting displayed, so I went ahead and created a CSS file. In this case, I just defined a couple of starting classes to just get a starting point. I wanted the whole block to be in bold text and to have a light blue background and to have a little bit of padding so it would look nice. Then you have to tell Drupal how to find this particular style sheet within your module context. So you give it a libraries YAML file that defines the path and tells it which version of your style sheet you're currently using. Now, the big thing is coming up with the data, right? You got to have data that's live and also that's going to be accurate. And I found a wonderful site out there that could help with this, the Weather Underground. They basically are serving up weather on a daily basis and have been doing it for years. The name actually comes from a student group at the University of Michigan way back when. A guy by the name of Jeff Masters, who was a meteorology student, came up with the idea of serving up weather over a network connection. Up until then, it had never been done. The wire services were sending text pages and text articles around, but he decided, well, you ought to be able to get directly to it. So what he did was he basically set up a telnet server that he could telnet into the mainframe that had all the weather data that had been racked up and accumulated, and he could just ask it. It sort of strikes me as kind of a test condition there, right? He's just kind of testing it out. But it kind of took off. People realized this was a quick way to get a weather report that was accurate and for today. Today, it's a web service owned by the Weather Channel, which in turn is owned by IBM. And you all use it every day. If you go on Google, you're accessing it. If you read anything that got published as a result of the Associated Press, weather predictions for the day, you're looking at the same database. Now, you know those cute little icons you see in the newspaper? Chances are they came from this source as well. The data actually has several sources. First of all, there's the National Weather Service. They have weather stations at airports and government buildings all over. But did you know there's also a whole network of personal weather stations out there? Over 250,000 of them at this point. That's right, you could have a weather station in your backyard and you could be feeding it into this database that Underground is keeping up with and using to predict the weather. I'll give you a graph here that shows they cover the whole North American continent, up in Canada, all over the US, and this is just a sampling of the stations that they've got out there live. And they even cover down in Mexico and the Caribbean. So it's kind of an amazing network that they've put together. And every day they crunch through all the data that comes in on as quickly as it arrives and come up with forecasts for all of these areas. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, which makes the official government forecast, have their predictions geared down to a 10-kilometer grid. So they try to identify what the weather's going to be in that grid for the day, and they serve that up. The Weather Underground takes it down to 4 kilometers. So I would consider that to be even more precise and more useful. But given that as an awesome source, you still have the challenge of using the latitude and longitude. Well, fortunately, Weather Underground has got an API call that's geared around that. You can give it the exact latitude and longitude, and it will serve it up for you. Let me give you an example of what the API call looks like. This is actual code. I hope you can read it in the back. But it's taking two arguments, the latitude and longitude, using an API key, which you can get for free from Weather Underground. You just go on their website and ask for one. Then it just does a file get contents on the Weather API using the particular latitude and longitude that's given, turns around and parses that. Then I jump down into that return data array and spot the particular forecast that I'm looking for. They even give you a reference to the appropriate icon to use for that particular location. Works great, works great. Here's some more of that code where I check to be sure it's one of the icons that I've got already downloaded, that they didn't introduce a new one. And I also have a default condition that I'm going to state. And then appropriately down at the bottom, I'm giving you the rendering for this particular block of code. It's just a div with a paragraph and an image included in it. Fairly simple at this point, just enough to get up and go on with this task. I also created a filter article module, which I guess that's even smaller, might be a little hard to read. But it basically defines a namespace for the plugin filter that's going to be used here and a class in order to execute that filter. Here's a little larger. This is the process method that's going to basically go out there and process a particular article, filtering out the weather tag and replacing it with the weather forecast. So you can see what I'm doing here. First of all, I'm parsing the text for the weather tag, and that returns the geolocation, which is just a simple array with latitude, longitude, and the name of the tag. Then I'm calling get forecast to go out there and execute with those two values and return a forecast. And then it's just a simple replacement of the actual tag content, which I saved here, with the weather forecast. Then the result gets returned as the content to display on the page. Now let's look at the result, the efforts. This is an actual page from the site that a hike I recently took. It's one I'd recommend. It's Rainbow Falls. Anybody ever been there? Yeah, have you? It's a beautiful 80-foot drop, and you can see in the photo there that there's somebody actually standing underneath the waterfall to kind of give it some perspective. But my wife and I went out there hiking recently, and I wrote up this article for it, and it was quite a hike. I don't think I'm going to forget it anytime soon, because we ran into a family of black bears. We were coming back down the trail after we've been up to the falls, and I see some people ahead of me that have just stopped, and for some reason they're trying to make a phone call, it looked like. They had their cameras up. They were taking a picture of this family of bears that were just about 50 feet away from me, about as far as the door back there. It was a mother bear and two cubs, and they were just literally foraging through the grass, twigs, looking for food. And the bears get real hungry this time of year, so they're trying to eat everything they can to fatten up for the winter. Fortunately for me, there was a stream in between us, so I didn't have to worry about getting too close to the bears. But it was an interesting sight and something I'll certainly remember a long time. But what I did was, while I was on the trail, I captured my location using my compass app, my phone, went back, wrote up the article, included 2 of the pictures that I took. Sorry, I couldn't get a good picture of the bears. They were in the brush too much. And then I added a weather tag to the bottom of the article. And here's a close-up to see it. On that particular day, it was clear skies and beautiful weather. Great day for hiking. You see down here, I've exposed the HTML content, which you'll recognize as coming straight out of the filter. And that's exactly how the filter was rendering it. It just filled in with the content, including the customized icon and the Weather Underground logo, which you're required as part of the licensing agreement to include in your applications. Well, so this works great, and I invite you to go check out my site. You'll see the weather on different pages will be different because they're all getting dynamically generated for whatever time you fire it. There are some caveats to be mindful of in taking this approach and using it. First off, the weather's always changing. I can't account for that. But you want to sort of consider that in the design of your site. In this particular case, I'd recommend that you limit your caching time to 1 hour. That way, you're not going to have the case where you present some old weather data long after it's been changed. It wouldn't be appropriate to keep the same data out there rendered the same way it was this morning because now the weather has changed. Another recommendation I have is to pull down the set of icon files. I give you the URL here where you can find those, by the way. And just copy them onto your server. You're free to use them. You might even want to customize them. So you can design your own set of icon files if you like, or add some finishing touches to it. Here's a couple. So they have both night and day icons available for you to use. Thirdly, be mindful that there is a limit with the basic free account service that I'm using. They limit you to at most 10 API calls per minute. That on the back end is firing off their best forecast technology, which again goes out to those big databases and pulls in the current weather forecast. But they do impose a limit. And if you exceed that limit, as I quickly found out when I had about 10 articles, all of a sudden my front page fired off 10 requests, and they send a nice email and let you know about it, and basically warning you that you've exceeded your allocated limit with that particular plan. You can certainly upgrade and get more access for a plan. In this particular case, I like the fact they applied some grace. They send you a notice about using a raindrop they call it, which is just a mulligan. You know, yeah, you went over the limit here. We're going to give you a mulligan. You can try again, or you can check out how you might add more API calls in a day. They certainly have commercial accounts that you can leverage for a big site. It'll give you as many API calls as you want. All right, well, with all that in mind, let's go out and look at the site. See if I can pull it up here. Voila, okay. So I've logged in here to awesomehikingexperience.com, and I'm looking at the basic admin page. I have the manage or the administrator's toolbar loaded, so it makes it a little easier to navigate around. In this particular case, I'm going to go out and look at some of the content. And here's my list of articles. There's Rainbow Falls. I've also hiked along Sharp's Ridge and the Sugarlands. Laurel Falls is another real popular trail inside the Smoky Mountains. All of these are great day hikes. I recommend them. I thought it might be interesting if we go out and add a new article out there. So I'm going to create an article. I actually did a hike here yesterday, which was the Roswell Greenway. Anybody ever been there? Yeah, it's just up the road about maybe 5 miles in Roswell. It's an extensive greenway system that extends from there all the way up to exit 12 on Georgia 400. I'm just going to write some basics here. The Roswell Greenway starts in the neighborhoods of Roswell and extends north to exit 12 on Georgia 400. And I might also, let's see if I can pull in a picture. See if this will work. I got a picture from the trail right here. Call this the view along the trail. And I'll put it in the center and add a caption to the effect of what we're looking at so you can see it. There's the picture. And room for the caption down below. You know what? I think it came in sideways. That's what I get for not editing it first. Greenway Trail at exit 8, which is where I was located at the time. Okay. Now comes the important part. I'm going to add my weather tag. And find it easy to use the Compass app on a phone to tell you exactly where you're located. I'm going to be approximate here probably. We're at 33 degrees. Oops. Where'd it go? Up. I think I hit return inadvertently. I'll go back and find that content. I guess it canceled instead of saving it. Let's try it again then. It's kind of a challenge to type sideways. Exit 12 on Georgia 400. And then I'll pull in my picture again. view from the trail. I'll center it. I think I'll skip the caption this time. There it is. And then down here, I'll add my weather tag. 33 degrees, 0.8 north, negative 84.3 west. And I can complete the tag. That's an approximation, but you can get as precise as you like. And now I'm going to just save it, which will effectively put it on the front page. And there we are. Sideways photo and all. Looks like the API call didn't fire, so let's edit that and make sure I didn't mistype it. Oh, well, that could be the case.
Isn't that line in your tags field?
Say again?
Put that line in your tags field since we're mentioning about tags?
No, it goes here.
Okay.
I don't see the typo though. Maybe I don't need that space. And save and publish it. Let's try it again. There we go. All right, so you can see that it did fire, and today it's saying it's a sunny day, right? Warm, pleasant weather, but that's how you get this filter to execute, and then it will serve up continually every time somebody hits the page, updating it once an hour, because I have my caching set to limit it to 1 hour at most. All right. Well, with that, I'll take questions and answers. We've still got about 17 minutes. Yes?
Are you reporting a forecast or an observation?
It's actually a forecast. I figure it's going to take you some time to get to the trail, so I want to give it. It is today's forecast. You can actually dig into the weather structure that gets returned, and it gives you multiple forecasts. So you can pick one of those for a particular time period. So you could pick something like end of day or even tomorrow from that location. But I chose to go with the first entry, which is typically right now.
I could see that you would want to have maybe a 3-day forecast, because if people were going, as you intend, for people to go explore and say maybe, because it's going to take you, like especially if you go to a different part of the state or something, you may want to wait until the next day or something.
Yeah, so.
Because that's your goal, is for people to be drawn, but of course they need to know what the weather is maybe tomorrow, the next day.
So you're suggesting a 3-day forecast. That'd be easy to do. All you'd have to do, you're going to get the same data structure. You'd have to go through and figure out where those 3-day forecast entries are, and you'd have to change the rendering in the filter method so that it would give you 3 days instead of just 1. That'd be easy to do. Yes, in the back. Say again? Marketable locations? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Multiple.
Oh, multiple. Well, the question is, could you have multiple locations? And actually, I see no reason why you couldn't. I could have put 3 tags in that particular article. One for the beginning of the trail, one for the end of the trail, and even one for the middle. And it would have fired off 3 calls, returning the weather for each of those 3 locations. If I was hiking something long like the Appalachian Trail, I might want to do that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, good question. Who else?
So how do you handle the day and, we talked about day and night icons, so if it's forecast, you just pretty much go use day icons?
You know, I've been thinking about that one as next enhancement to this. What the Weather Underground does is they give you an icon reference, but it's real easy to change it to a nighttime icon. You just add the letters NT dash to the front of it, and that'll point you at one of their nighttime icons. So I'm thinking I could add another method that would go out and check the time of day, tell me whether it's daytime or nighttime, that is before sunset or after sunset. If it's after sunset, I would prepend to the icon reference NT, and that would effectively change it.
That makes sense on observations, but not necessarily forecast, right?
I think it would change the forecast icon too, because they'd probably be telling you it's going to rain tonight, or it's going to be a moonlit night.
Periods of time for their forecasts, like hourly or such?
I don't recall exactly how much they break it down in this general call. I think I'm getting probably next 4 hours type of thing. But you could certainly add additional parameters to the call and specify that you wanted a specific hour or even a specific date range. I think there's a lot of things you can do with it, and they've got great documentation for the API that you can check out. Other questions?
You could do this, like you could basically use the same format and do it for a completely different domain. Like if I wanted football scores, for example, you just have to adjust the API call and maybe, obviously a few other specific things, but the process is the same.
Yeah, you could change the tag to football, and you could call a different API, maybe to return the latest score or whether the game was finished or not, whether your team was winning or not. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do here. Now it's the basic approach is that you're writing a filter, you're generating content, and you're allowing the filter to filter that content to do something specific, something customized that you have specified in the code. So yeah, there are lots more ways you can use this, leverage the same concept and idea.
So where you put that tag within the content of the article,
Mm-hmm.
could you style that to, like, if I wanted it right justified or?
Oh yeah.
So you just style around the tag?
Remember the CSS file that I defined?
Mm-hmm.
All you'd have to do is go change that, and you could specify. I think I gave it a blue background just to be something different on the page, but I could see where you could move it around. If you wanted to locate it at the top of the page, maybe top right instead, you could do that. Right, it's going to render as HTML content, and then the style sheet specifications are going to kick in. You could animate it, you could move it around, anything you wanted to do. All right, any other questions? Cool. Good. Taking me right to my conclusion, and then I'll give you the code reference. So in conclusion, I hope you've learned something here about Drupal 8, maybe that you didn't know before. And you can select a hike. You can check the weather forecast for today. I want to invite you to go hiking. You'll enjoy it. If you want to know more about the Great Smoky Mountains, you can check out their website. And on the last slide, I've included some links that I think you'll find helpful. There's lots of great information out on the Drupal 8 site. The second entry from diffuse.com, that's the same guy that did the quote that I cited earlier. And he takes you through the whole process of building your first Drupal module. And then there's the GitHub reference for this code. It'll be up there Monday. Thank you. Have a good day.